Hey everyone, and thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is Justin, and clearly my last video didn't go over so well. And first and foremost, I'd like to apologize for my delivery in it. Clearly, I did not communicate what was going on in my head or the way that I had wanted it to. But sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much if you did take the time to watch it, if you gave it a like, if you gave it a dislike, if you commented and told me what was wrong with it. I do really appreciate that. I'm looking to improve myself. Clearly, like I said, I made a mistake. I didn't communicate what I was trying to or intending to communicate, and that's on me. I should have rewatched it a few more times, picked up on some areas that might have come across the wrong way, and I should have edited it. But again, I appreciate your support on it and I appreciate your feedback on it. I'll be sure to make better content in the future. But with that said, I learned from that it's best to stick to what you know and what you love. And what I know and love is the Toronto Maple Leafs, and there is some news out there. So I just wanted to go over some of those items and kind of go through something a little bit different here. I'm sure a lot of you watching this video are familiar with CapFriendly. If you're not, it's a website where pretty much it breaks down into depth each team's cap situation. It's got some really cool tools on there. So we're going to go through one of those tools, an armchair GM, to give my thoughts on what this team could potentially look like for next season based on some of the news that we're hearing. All right, so the intention of this exercise today is to kind of go through some of the reports that we've heard so far from the Leafs, but also try to make this team without doing anything as dramatic as possible. So we're going to do it in the realm of possibility, not do anything crazy. I'm not going to make any wild assumptions. I'm just going to kind of go through what the bare minimum changes would be for this team, and we can experiment after and see what is needed to make this team competitive and how competitive this team will ultimately be for next season. As you can see here, I've got the armchair GM open and we've got the salary cap set to what it is for next season. And I think the very first thing that you need to do here is take Nick Robertson and stick him in that lineup. Nick Robertson is starting next year in the NHL out of training camp. You need Nick Robertson and the likes of, let's grab him here, Timothy Legrand, because they are on entry-level contracts. Aside from the fact that I think that they're ready to step into an NHL role, we don't know how capable either one of those are to play a full season at NHL level, but it's time to give them a look and time to give them a chance. It worked with Sandin. It's paid off so far, but also as important are those entry-level contracts. The Leafs do not have a lot of cap flexibility for next season, and so you need those cheap deals with the entry-level contract in Robertson, Sandin, Legrand, and even Adam Brooks, and those are going to be incredibly important for next year. We've also got, as you can see here, Wayne Simmonds. Just announced today, Wayne Simmonds signed a contract with the Toronto Maple Leafs, a 2-year, $1.8 million, $900,000 a year. Excellent deal. I love it. Wayne Simmonds did not provide last year what we needed from him. I made the comparison in last video to Corey Perry, and Corey Perry is playing that role absolutely perfect. He's providing a scoring touch where he needs to, but most importantly, he's being a pest. He doesn't take a shift off. He's in your face. He makes you know he's on the ice. We needed that out of Wayne Simmonds, and he was excellent at the beginning of the season. He provided some assistance on the power play. He provided an offensive touch while also providing a physical flair. You could tell that's a big reason why they wanted to bring back Wayne Simmonds. He was a guy that the guys loved in the locker room. They wanted to play for, and although he really didn't step up down the stretch or in the playoffs like I wanted him to, I'm happy to give him another chance. He's the kind of player that this team really needs in order to have success, and I'm glad we're giving him another shot. And to that note, I'd also like to back another player that has been reported, but I think it also makes a lot of sense. Some people really will not like this, but I do think Nick Foligno deserves another shot. Where is he? Deserves another shot with the Leafs. Now, the argument here is that he came last year injured and did not provide what we needed. He didn't score any goals. He was very little of an offensive threat. But as we now know, he also was injured at the time of the trade, and so he wasn't able to provide any of that physical flair that we expected from him either, because he was injured. And he was really excited to come here. It was reported that he worked directly with Jarmo Kekalainen to make sure that he came to the Toronto Maple Leafs specifically You could tell he was excited to be here wearing the hat at the press conference, following in his dad's shoes. And I think the message here is, Nick, we want you back. We think you're an important piece for our team. We think you fit in here with the culture, but we know that you didn't get the opportunity to provide what we know you can provide for this team. And we'd like to do something special here for 1 year. We'd like to offer you a 1-year deal, get you back here. You can show what you're worth. You can show what you can do. And then after that, you can test the free agent market, whether that's going back to Columbus or there's a report he might want to go join his brother in Minnesota. All up to you. But I think it would be important to give him another shot, and I think he can provide what this team needs. So we'll give him, let's say, a $2 million deal for 1 year. I think that's more than enough money. I think that's enough for Nick to say, hey, you know what, I'll give it another shot for that price. I wouldn't pay him much more than that, to be honest, maybe 2.5, but I would not go north of $3 million whatsoever for Nick Foligno. At that point, you could find another serviceable player to play alongside Matthews and Marner. You don't need much with those two. I mean, you just need a support player there. And so I think Nick Foligno's got more than enough of what it takes to play with those two and elevate their game. And I'd like to see a full season under his belt. Next, I don't want to make the assumption of who are we going to protect, who is going to move. But for this exercise, obviously, we have to. And I think last year, as well as he played, we learned that Alex Kerfoot is not a true centerman and not a third-line center. And when John Tavares went down, Alex Kerfoot was forced into a second-line center role, and I don't think that that's really his build. He would be much better suited on the wing, but for $3.5 million, I don't think he's playing in the top six. That's too steep for a winger, and I think that that is ultimately who we will expend in the Seattle expansion draft. So let's go ahead and move Alex Kerfoot. We will select team, go down to Seattle, and I'll just make a one-sided deal here where there's no assets retained, and of course that just means that they are claiming him as $3.5 million in cap space. But that leaves a large gap in that third center role. And I think there's a number of players that we could sign for relatively cheap to fit in there. I isolated for the purpose of this hypothetical situation. But again, just use this as kind of an example of what this team could do and the range that we might be looking at paying. I really like the looks of Alex Wenberg. He's got a great stat line. 31 points in 62 games is all you really need as a third-line center. He is a true centerman, left-handed like Kerfoot. He's on a relatively cheap deal, and he's only 26 years old. He played behind Alex Barkov, a really, really excellent two-way player in this league, so hopefully he can take some of what he learned from Barkov and bring it to the Leafs. Hypothetically, this is who I would target, and considering he had $2.25 million last year, I think maybe a little bit of a bump in salary. We'll go 2.7 just for the sake of it. The numbers, it's not really that important for me in this exercise because it's just a hypothetical. Same thing with the term. You can make this 2 years you want. You can make it 1 year and 3 years. Doesn't really matter. I'm just trying to give kind of an outlook for next year. So let's sign Wenberg to $2.7 million for, what did I do? 2 years, 1 year, 2 years. Hypothetical. Let's stick him in that third center line. I think that looks good. I like Wenberg there. He's able to play that natural center position. He's able to move around the lineup if you want to play him on the wing. He's got some scoring touch, but he's also a defensively responsible player. And then Spezza and Brooks played well together with Thornton, and Thornton really couldn't provide all that much. So I'm not a big fan of Pierre Engvall, but I think that he can definitely provide a little bit more offensively and skilled than Thornton did, and so I think that he should be able to fit in on that fourth line. Again, a defensively responsible player who can chase down the puck, get you the puck, and Spezza showed, he's capable of still scoring in this league. He's capable of still playing at a high level in this league, and he already signed here for $750,000. Excellent, excellent, excellent. He said he would take less if he could. Love that kind of attitude on the team. Love to have him. And then I'd say the extra player to start the season would be Joey Anderson. He should be a player that is capable of playing in the NHL, capable of providing a little bit of depth if we were to get an injury or need him to step up in the roster. And so we start the season with him as our extra player. And so for our defense, we've got the exact same unit as last year, plus Timothy Legrand, and I would bring back another piece last year, Zach Bogosian. I think he impressed everybody with his play last year. He was really consistent. Really fit well with Dermott. I think he would do the same thing with Sandin. He was on a $1 million deal last year, so let's do the exact same thing this year for another 1 year, just a hypothetical, and that rounds out the defense. So we've got Timothy Legrand as the 7th. You'd like to get him in some games this year, give him a real test in the NHL. I think they're able to do that, but you got Zach Bogosian playing with Rasmus Sandin. I think that's a good fit, and that shores out our defense. So what are we remaining? We need a goalie. There's a number of different routes you go here. I isolated again one player just as an example of what could be done for next year, but with the goaltending market, I really don't expect an overpay here. I think you're looking at about a $1 to $2 million range. Depends if the Leafs are looking to go with a real tandem goaltending experience, or if they're looking at really running Jack Campbell as their starter and having a backup. And I think James Reimer would be a very capable backup for this team. He's still young enough at 33 that he can put good hockey in place. If he's only a backup, he can definitely be serviceable in that role. And he was loved in Toronto, and I think he'd be more than happy to come back here. So let's give him, hypothetically, $1.5 million. I don't know if you take that little, because on 3.4 last year, but it's a good placeholder, for example. And again, if you want to spend a little bit more on a goaltender that is a little bit better, or keep it around that range and go with more of a backup style, then I think the team is well suited either way. So here's an example of what I see the Leafs kind of looking like for next year, with the bare minimum being done. Again, the Leafs have reported that they're not moving any of the big contracts. I do believe them in saying that. But if you're not moving one of those big contracts, there's really not a whole lot you can do to this team to make it much more flexible and make it much more competitive for next season. So this is, I think, the best that we can do. But in this experiment, I think something that was extremely important was retaining cap space going into the season. So you could start the season with this roster next year. However, we have $4.7 million in cap space. Last year, we went into the season with no cap space, no cap flexibility, and that made it very difficult for us to adjust throughout the regular season given what our needs were. And considering Frederik Andersen dealt with injuries, and then we had Jack Campbell dealing with injuries, we weren't able to go out and get a goaltender until the trade deadline, and we weren't able to make the moves to address the areas of need, like the power play, like the defense at times. Like, we didn't have any flexibility. With this build, you start the regular season with this team. Do I think this team on paper could be competitive in the regular season? Competitive, sure. Not really a first place team whatsoever, especially if we're going back to the Atlantic Division where you're playing the likes of Montreal, Boston, Tampa Bay. No. But what this does is it allows you to start the regular season, still be competitive to an extent, still win games, still be in the playoff hunt, and still have $5 million in cap space. During the regular season, you want to make a splash, you want to make a deal, that gives you so much flexibility. At the trade deadline, you want to make a big signing like Taylor Hall did in Boston last year. You can afford it with this build. And I think that kind of the mindset we have to have for next year. You go into the season with what you think is the bare bones minimum of a team, and then you adjust it and amend it as the season goes on. If you need to spend a little bit more, you are capable of doing that with that cap space. The loss of Zach Hyman is big, absolutely. But if you bring back Nick Foligno, he can support Matthews and Marner. Robertson, I do see being as tenacious as Zach Hyman, having a similar kind of work ethic. However, does have a little bit more of an offensive flair. Will be in his first real season in the NHL, so we'll have to monitor how he can do. But I do think if he plays to his potential, he could be an excellent support piece for Tavares and Nylander. Mikheyev, Wenberg, Simmonds is just a shutdown scoring line. Like, they can do a little bit of both. They're just a serviceable third line that, can play in any situation. And then that fourth line is really all you need from a fourth line, especially with Jason Spezza, Adam Brooks on that fourth line. I think it looks really good. Same defensive group, and Jack Campbell showed last year he can absolutely be a starter. So if he stays healthy, he can lead this team to the playoffs just based on his play, potentially. So again, this is just my experiment to kind of show the bare minimum of what could be done for next year. But I'd love to hear your opinions on it. Let me know what you think about this build, and let me know what other moves you think would be important to make. Again, I definitely recommend testing out CapFriendly and the Armchair GM tool. I've read through some. You can see some that are posted. I've read through some that are a little bit more reserved and a little bit more out there as well, with trades like Marner and going after Dougie Hamilton. I'm always interested in it. The offseason is meant for fantasy hockey. It's meant for fantasizing what next year could be. It's meant for dreaming of potential. It's meant for playing out different situations without having any real idea of what's going to happen. So if you can, play around with this and send it to me. I'd love to see some different examples of what you can build there. But again, let me know your thoughts. Jason Spezza, Wayne Simmonds, they're both back. It's official. Love to see it. Hopefully we can see a little bit more out of Simmonds for next year, but I don't mind it. And I think this team doesn't look so bad. So again, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.